Good morning. This is State of the Arts NYC, and this is your host, Savona Bailey-McClain. We are so happy because today we are at our brand new studios at BRIC Media in downtown Brooklyn. And we have with us a wonderful, wonderful guest who will talk to us about his artistic practice. This is Chow Chun Fai.
Hello, everyone.
And we are so happy to have him because in addition to his exhibition, which is just opened at the Eli Klein Gallery in the West Village, the exhibition is also a part of ACAO, the Asian Contemporary Art Week. So thank you so much, Chow, for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Great. So for the benefit of our audience, let me just give you a little bit of background information about Chow. He was born in 1980 in the city of Hong Kong. He is a visual artist, also an interdisciplinarian, where he mixes up painting, photography, and on occasion, performance art. He teaches painting, and he's also a political activist. So I just want to kick off our conversation with Chow to talk about his current exhibition at the Eli Klein Gallery. So why don't you start us off, Chow, by telling us about your exhibition?
I was on the program. It's a residence program. So I was in New York since June. So
okay.
I have been in New York for 3 months already.
All right.
So in this show, there are now 19 paintings hanging on the wall.
Okay.
And most of the painting, I made it here. So for the whole summer, I was staying in the studio, which it's the gallery, actually.
Okay.
And most of the painting, I finished it here. And
wow.
They are some images from movies.
Okay.
So I captured some still and caption
okay.
The subtitle from different kinds of movie. I try to have Hollywood movie.
Okay.
And some Hong Kong local movie. And I also try to have movie from different ages.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see from the show, there will be images and subtitles from this movie, but I transform it into paint.
Okay.
And I try to have different meanings rather than just the caption or the capture from the movie, even though I didn't change the wording, because if I change the wording, I think it's too easy to create my own meanings.
Mm-hmm.
But when the wording, the caption is out of the context, which you don't, some of the movie you may know, but I bet audience from here, they may not know my hometown's movie.
Right.
But when they see the wording and the still, they will have different layers of interpretation. So that was my intention.
Okay. And I did go to the opening, and I saw several of the paintings, all of the paintings, in fact. So, yes, you're right. You had a lot of iconic American film scenes, The Godfather, Forrest Gump. You even had the film with Natalie Portman with The Cleaner. And so, yes, there were a lot of those iconic films that many of us could recognize. But what I also thought was interesting was some of the phrases, those captions that you had at the bottom of each of these paintings. And to me, they were almost philosophic. They weren't just from the film themselves. You were trying to convey these various messages with these mixtures of American and Hong Kong films. And what were you hoping that people would walk away from when they saw these combinations of paintings and philosophic captions?
Yeah, what I was concerned is about the interpretation on my work, of course, but also on different artwork.
Okay.
Like everyone knows the Last Supper.
Yes.
But I would say we would not be able to use the traditional mind to read the Last Supper anymore. Well, we know many different stories. Like if you saw the movie Da Vinci Code, then when you go back to the Last Supper, then maybe you will say that the young guy next to Jesus is not a guy.
It's a possibility. It's a woman.
Yes. But, of course, maybe the church will be upset by this kind of interpretation. But I would say it is impossible to keep your mind clear or pure to have that traditional interpretation even for this kind of masterpieces. So I would say I try to have a very open dialogue on my own work.
Okay.
So let me take some of the painting that is showing in the gallery as an example. That I have two paintings about paintings.
Yes,
that,
I saw those.
There were paintings inside the still, or I mean, there are actual paintings in the movies. One is Mr. Bean. That if you remember that there is a film about Mr. Bean being invited to a museum in the state to present about a painting. We all called it The Whistler's Mother.
Yes.
And of course, Mr. Bean made a mess. But what he was trying to say is that it is not just a painting, but it's more than a painting. So I have this subtitle. It is not just a painting, with the face of Mr. Bean looking at the Whistler's mother. So you can see in my painting, there's a painting, and the painting is actual real work from the real world. But it was a fake one in the movie. Okay. So you may have different interpretation if you know the movie or if you don't even watch it before. And next to it, I have another work, which is also a painting, inside a painting. It was from the movie Pollock. It's about abstract expressionist painter, of course. Everyone knows it's Jackson Pollock. And when Pollock started his new painting about the abstract expressionist images, everyone said that it is not painting. It is not considered to be a painting because of his style. So I also have this subtitle. It is not painting. On this image. So, of course, it is in line from the movie, but at the same time, I'm making joke on my own works.
Okay. All right. So basically, what you're trying to do is that you're trying to get viewers to kind of take a step back and look at these iconic still images, but then open their minds to other different types of possibilities. So that's your main goal. And with that said, I want to delve into the fact that over your artistic practice, that's one of the things that you have been pushing for throughout your career. Let's talk a little bit about that. In Hong Kong, you're in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong was taken over by China in 1997. And so now the life in China and Hong Kong is merging, and there's a concern about, artists sharing different types of views and opinions. So sometimes when artists are working on different art, it's not so much this literal translation, but the subtext and getting people to understand the layers of other messages that are being conveyed. So tell us a little bit about that, because I know we talked a little bit before the show about how you were working just to help other artists gain access to old factories that are no longer in use but wish to be used as working spaces and studios, correct?
Yes. Well, like what I have done on my work, that I try to have different layers of meanings behind the surface. And I think this is one of the reaction as an artist who is under pressure.
Okay.
That I didn't understand before, because I thought we were in a quite liberal environment before.
Right.
But now I would say I am trying to express something that I cannot tell directly.
Right.
So that's why I am trying to hide some of the meaning behind the surface. And I was a bit involved in politics.
Okay.
That was because of the studio I'm using. At the very beginning, I was just trying to negotiate with the Hong Kong government about the factory land use. That like many cities, also in New York, that many artists use the factory space as their studio. But at the same time, in Hong Kong, we are considered to be illegal, or I would say they will say we are violating the regulation. But I would say if we are violating the regulation, either we are doing something wrong, or there is some mistake on the regulation. So I spent more than 10 years for this kind of dialogue with the government, and we're trying to change the regulation as long as we are doing well, we are doing something good for the community too. But I was more involved because I find that it is not about what we did in the factory, but it's more about the absence of the cultural voice in the discussion. No matter it's about the factory use or different kinds of policy making on art, or even on the in general public. And the absence of the cultural voice was made because of the Legislative Council, I would say.
And just to interrupt briefly, this is like an issue that is happening all over the world, where artists are trying to convey that they're cultural workers and they deserve certain rights so that they can engage in their profession. So I find this quite fascinating, how this is such an international issue.
Yes, I think it happens in every city, in every country. But of course, the law or the political background is different in different places. So I was facing my own experience, my difficulties in my hometown.
Wow. So were you able to, at least in your efforts to negotiate within the Chinese bureaucracy, to convey that, artists need spaces, that they need to come together and share what, their needs just might be outside of just the factory, so that they can engage, so that they can contribute, so that they can be a part of the society?
That was a sad story, I would say. As a painter, we are still fine because we closed our door and then we made our own painting inside the studio. But, there are many different kinds of artists.
Right.
They are performers. And when they were having their performance in the space, then attract many audience. So there were stories that the police and the firemen tried to check the space while there were performance in the factory, and they could be captured.
Wow.
So at the end of the day, I ran an election in the Legislative Council because of this issue, because I think even though we have so-called representative in the council, but the voice was absent. So I spent the whole year running an election to raise this question in the public.
Wow. So the Chinese government is still very sensitive to the works by Chinese artists. Do they really have such a need to be afraid? Because it sounds like they might be more, they're concerned, but there might not be as much concern, with what you're trying to do. Because it seems as though some of the artists they just want to do their thing. They just want to paint or they want to do photography. They're not trying to say anything more than that. So is there that real concern that the government should have, or is it just imagined?
Well, I would raise 2 points. One is culture is always a very important agenda for communists, no matter it's China or the former Russian government. This is the first point. The other one is all this so-called undercover police is a big business in China. Well, of course, it could be very ironic that I heard, not in Hong Kong, but from artists in China, that I heard a story that there is an artist, he tried to escape from the city that he used to be because he know that there were so many undercover around his house. So before he left, when he was packing his luggage, then someone knocked on the door.
Ooh.
And then there was undercover police, and the police begged him not to leave because if he leave, then they will lose their job.
Oh.
So that's what I meant, that it is a big business in China.
Oh, wow. Wow, that I did not know. So they pleaded with him not to leave so that they could keep their jobs and kind of keep the structure going. So therefore, artists do play a role, a very important role in the culture there, because it might be a way of kind of pushing forward certain social issues or social concerns.
Yeah, when you check some of the famous artists like Ai Weiwei on their Weibo or the Twitter, sometimes Ai Weiwei play with this undercover police, right?
Yes, he does.
He just put the camera in front of this police, and of course, he will have much more fantastic story to tell.
Yes, he does. But then he does share some very important issues. I saw the exhibition he did in New York City a little over a year ago, and he was talking about, refugee crisis, and it was just shoes everywhere of different sizes, of different people. I actually brought groups of people so that they could see that exhibition, and it was something to behold. It made you pause. You realize that there's this real, problem going around, and it's not just about immigration. It's about people trying to flee for their lives, and he's doing that, I just have to. So continuing with that conversation about Ai Weiwei and just Chinese artists in general, you were kind of sharing with us how you might be able to push certain agendas forward. You were talking to me briefly about an artist who was trying to leave. Tell us about that again. The artist who was trying to leave an area.
Okay. So I heard some story about that too. it was not in Hong Kong, but in mainland China, that there is a guy who is trying to escape from the undercover police. So he packed his luggage. He tried to escape silently, but suddenly someone knocked on the door, and when he opened the door, he found out that it was the undercover police.
Wow.
And the police begged him not to leave, because if he leave, then all the police will lose their job. So that was I meant about it. It is a big business to have all this undercover police checking all the artists and or the general public in general. Yeah.
So you guys really could help the country in many ways move forward with your art, to see that there's more to life than just managing people. There's so many areas where innovation and design and photography could actually help people, so that you could solve a lot of problems or challenges that people are dealing with day to day. It doesn't have to be this sort of battle over, concepts and ideas. And that's what I'm seeing from a lot of this new contemporary art, that you're trying to push, life in a manner that could embrace more people and embrace, solutions. Is that one thing that you feel is, you're trying to do?
Or I should put it in other words, that I used to be more calm artist. I thought art don't have to be political.
Right.
Well, you just try to be an artist, to be liberal, so you do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, I realized why the Chinese artists, or the so-called mainland Chinese artists, were so political. It is just simply a reaction. When you are being hit, then maybe you don't have to fight back, but at least you try to block the fist.
Right.
So to block the fist is just a very simple reaction.
Right.
So an artist just use their work to react to the actual environment. So that is a very simple way to give an expression.
All right. So do you see Chinese contemporary art evolving more and more, where people are expressing not just their craftsmanship, but also the environment, like you said, or ideas that they feel might need to be explored even further to benefit the whole society?
I would say in different media, the story could be different. So in visual art, we are more free because we are not in the structure. We are not in the system.
Okay.
But if you say something about the film industry, well, because in my work, I work with films and paintings. So I try to know a bit about different industry. If you are talking about films, then it was much more under control. It is written in the Chinese law what to write or not to be written in the films.
Really?
Yeah. Some of them, it could be funny.
Okay.
You may say it is funny. Like you cannot have ghost story if it is a contemporary China.
Really?
Yes, it is written in law. If you are making story of modern China, then there must be no ghost. If there is ghost, then you must be daydreaming in the film.
Wow.
Of course, it could be. It sounds like I'm making fun, but
right.
This is about power. This is about their political concern. Because under communist rule, there should be no ghost.
Really? I'm just trying to understand how does that relate, but okay. All right. There's a fear there.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm trying to tell the funny part of the story, but something like no police should die in Chinese film.
Really?
Yeah, it is written in law. So that what I meant that if you are in film industry, there are thousands of rules that you have to follow in modern China.
Wow. Now that's a lot. So it takes a lot for creative people in China to just share a story, because you have so many hurdles to overcome in order to share whatever message it is that you want to convey. So for you, you're finding this freedom because you stick with visual art, so therefore you can play with it a lot more, even though you have to be careful with, how you state, what you're doing, but there is more freedom.
Yes. And I also witnessed some kind of censorship too in China. Like police will go to shows, in exhibition, they check if all the works are okay for their censorship. If they found anything which is not appropriate, they will tell you to take the painting off from the wall.
Wow.
So as in Hong Kong, we are trying to not to have this happen in Hong Kong.
Okay,
so,
like sort of being an experiment, a laboratory. So therefore, if you could show that there's no reason for them to fear, it could actually grow.
Yes.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. And not only is that fair, that's a possibility, because you're sort of not on the mainland and there's a little bit of distance, so you're influenced by a lot of other people and cultures, and if they can see that there's no harm with what you're doing, then hopefully that will also afford other artists on the mainland more freedoms as well.
Exactly. In the 80s, Hong Kong was the pioneer of China. We were still in the rule of British colonial government, but we were decided to so-called return to China in the 80s. And for the Chinese government, even for Deng Xiaoping, who was the chair of the Communist Party, that he thought that Hong Kong should be the pioneer of the whole China in different ways, in economical development, which is true until today. You can see the economical reform was so strong in China. And also, Hong Kong should act as a pioneer of political reform too. But I would say it didn't happen after the economical reform was done in China, because it could threaten the rule of the government if the political or even the cultural reform start. So at the end of the day, Hong Kong cannot be the pioneer of a political or cultural development or for the whole China. But on the other hand, they try to make Hong Kong to become one of the Chinese city rather than a pioneer for the cultural and political side.
Okay, but you're still pushing for it to be that, even though right now it's not, and they're afraid. You're still pushing for that possibility, so that way the whole Chinese culture can evolve, it can grow.
Yes, but for many Hong Kong, we try to be more realistic today. We are not trying to pull the whole China into one direction, but we are trying to protect Hong Kong from being one of this big giant monster.
Okay, all right. So, but still, you're by doing that, trying to pull away and kind of being allowed to experiment. It can be sort of like that model that could evolve for the mainland. Because I see a lot of positive things happening. Your contemporary art scene, the talent is definitely there. I mean, you can see it in the brushstrokes of your paintings and the details of the imagery that's in your paintings. The talent is definitely there. Now you're trying to blend that talent with a kind of thoughtful movement. And so I could see something really positive happening if you're allowed to experiment. In fact, I could see that across the globe. There's a lot of, hubs around the world where artists are trying to break through. They're trying to be innovative. They're trying to shake up things a little bit to say, here's some possibilities. But if they're not given that chance, that space, that voice, we're stuck where we are. And I think people are ready now for that breakthrough, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Imagine if you're a script writer and you are not allowed to write something about ghosts or a fallen policeman, like what I just said, then that's the limitation of your creativity.
Yes. So this is a real possibility. Well, I really enjoyed our talk because I've learned so much about the scene. And so many of us in New York, in the United States, we never get a chance to really have in-depth conversations with artists from China or maybe even Central Asia to hear. That's why this whole ACAO week, which is turned into a couple of months, is so important because now we get a chance to learn, and it's not being spoon-fed to us. We get to hear your voice, your perspective, your understanding, and then that helps us to get along because politically, we're not doing so well with China right now. There's a lot of fighting going on.
I'll keep watching the news.
Yes, but if we get to talk to people directly, that could possibly improve relationships because it's not just what somebody dictates, but it's from those personal contacts where we get to learn, appreciate, respect, and even support. So I just want to thank you so very much for coming on and joining us for our first show in our new studio.
I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, and thank you so very, very much. So I just wanted to let our audience know that your show will be up at the Eli Klein Gallery, which is located at 398 West Street. That's right off the West Side Highway in the West Village. And how long will the show be up?
It will last for more than a month.
More than a month, until mid-October? Okay, till mid-October. Highly, highly recommend that people go. It's not that far to get to from West 4th Street, and a short little walk, and they get to see your works, and they're really quite beautiful. So I just want to thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right. So this ends our broadcast. We will be up on BRIC Radio as well as other platforms, iTunes, Radio Public, Castbox, Mixcloud, SoundCloud, and others. So thank you so much, and we will come back to you next week with another great program.